Most people wouldn't think twice about spending a Saturday afternoon alone at the beach. There were hundreds of people nearby. The sun was out, and 22-year-old Heather Teague was simply lying back in her chair, waiting for her boyfriend to arrive. Nothing about the moment seemed dangerous, but Heather had unknowingly chosen a secluded spot beside a dense stretch of woods, and across the river, someone looking through a telescope suddenly noticed that she was no longer alone. A man had emerged from the trees, and he was carrying a weapon. And within moments, Heather was dragged away from that beach, never to be seen again. Heather Danielle Teague was the oldest of 4 children, and she'd grown up in Kentucky. In high school, she seemed to thrive. She was intelligent, she enjoyed writing poetry, and stayed busy with sports like basketball and track. At Webster County High School, she was also a cheerleader. She was crowned homecoming queen and earned the title of Junior Miss. Those who knew Heather saw a young woman with a lot of possibilities ahead of her. She'd considered studying psychology at Western Kentucky University, but after graduation, she decided to step away from school for a while. During that period, Heather began dating a man roughly 20 years older than she was, and somewhere along that way, her life began to change. Heather became involved with some unsavory people, doing things that were largely unlike her. In fact, just 2 weeks before today's case began, her parents had even reported her missing. She was eventually found safe, but when her family asked where she had been, Heather offered only a vague explanation and said she'd just been running around. Whatever was happening in Heather's life, she was still only 22 years old. She loved the beach, she talked about studying psychology, and still had time to find her way back towards the future that she had once imagined. But on August 26th of 1995, Heather went to the beach for what should have been an ordinary Saturday afternoon. But this time, she would not come home. August 25th of 1995 was a Saturday, and it started with Heather having plans with her boyfriend to go camping. She went to his house early in the morning, a little after 4 a.m., but his house was empty. His car was gone, and she was understandably irritated. So she decided to have a little beach day to herself at Newburgh Beach in Spotsville, Henderson County, Kentucky. Eventually, her boyfriend did call her, and the two talked back and forth about meeting for breakfast and whatnot, and it was ultimately decided that he would join up with her around noon. Heather agreed, the two ended their call, and she went back to sunbathing. Now, this beachfront is located on the Ohio River, and is actually on a border between the states of Kentucky and Indiana, and this is where Heather was headed. It's important to mention that she was on the Kentucky side of the river, and this beach was packed, but she decided to set up at a rather secluded spot, more or less anyway, by herself. But while Heather was sunbathing and enjoying her time at the beach, waiting for her boyfriend to meet up with her, a man named Tim Waltall was waiting for food on the opposite side of the river. And while he was waiting, he pulled out his telescope and was watching people on the beach on the other side and scoping out birds. This was apparently just an ordinary day for Tim. But this day was about to become anything but ordinary very quickly, because what Tim was about to see through that telescope was going to spark a crime investigation that spanned nearly 3 decades. As Tim peered through the glass, he saw a young woman with long dark hair wearing a red plaid bathing suit, round John Lennon-style sunglasses, and sitting on her lounge chair sunbathing. This was Heather Teague. But just a few moments later, Tim saw a man emerge from the woods behind her. But this man wasn't coming up out of the woods to set up his own sunbathing chair. No, he was armed. Tim sat there watching, stunned and in complete disbelief. The man then approached Heather from behind, threatened her with his weapon, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her away into the woods. At first, Tim thought this must have been a boyfriend pranking his girlfriend. But after 25 minutes passed, and he saw no sign of the couple emerging from that wooded area, he got very anxious. He also told his wife about this weird incident, who was in the back preparing food. And the two, they were just extremely confused. What had he just seen? Well, when his worry got the better of him, he called the Kentucky State Police as well as the Indiana State Police. In the call, Tim described the whole scene to the officer, and he even managed to describe the assailant in great detail. According to Tim, the man stood about 6 feet or maybe a little taller and weighed between 200 and 230 pounds with a large belly. He had brown hair that appeared to be a wig from a distance, a bushy beard, and he was wearing what looked like a mosquito net and a pair of jeans. And at the site, Heather's belongings and the chair remained untouched, and Tim could still see them through the telescope. Now, the distance between Tim's house and where Heather was lounging at the beach was about 300 feet, close to the length of a football field, so not too far at all. So even though Tim claimed that he had a very powerful magnification on his telescope, it's just bizarre that there was only one witness to this entire crime, and that's Tim, who was practically across the river 300 feet away from the site. Now, if you remember, this beach was packed with people, and even though Heather was sitting quite a distance away from all the other beachgoers, it's just puzzling to see that no one else in this vicinity saw this happen. According to FBI reports, there were about 500 to 600 people on that beach, and Heather was seated maybe 500 feet or so away from the main crowd. Now, this is a good distance away, but still, with so many people, you'd imagine someone had to have seen something. But no. So after the call, the police arrived at the scene as instructed by Tim, and when they got there, they could tell something was terribly wrong. Heather's lounging chair, her clothes, and other belongings were still there. There were also footprints leading from the chair into the wooded area, and as they got deeper, the cops recovered a discarded towel as well as the bottom half of a bathing suit. It was a red plaid bathing suit, the same one Heather had been wearing. But there was no sign of Heather, nor the man who took her. When the police first arrived, they still didn't know the identity of the woman who'd been taken from the beach, but that changed when they found a red Nissan parked nearby. Information inside the vehicle led them to 22-year-old Heather Teague, and what had begun as a report of a possible abduction, well, it now had a name and a family attached to it. Authorities immediately launched a large-scale search of the area. Volunteers combed the woods, divers searched the water, aircraft scanned from above, and tracking dogs followed Heather's scent away from the beach, but the trail eventually stopped. Investigators began to suspect that Heather had been moved from the area in a vehicle. Aside from a partial footprint believed to have come from a size 10 lacrosse predator boot, there was little physical evidence pointing them towards the person responsible. For Heather's family, the silence was especially frightening. She disappeared briefly before, but this was different. Her belongings had been abandoned. A witness reported seeing her forced into the woods, and days passed without a single call to her parents, her friends, or her boyfriend. Police questioned the people close to Heather, including both current and former boyfriends, but none of those interviews produced a meaningful lead. 10 days after she vanished, authorities released a composite sketch of a man seen on the beach, but by then Heather had seemingly disappeared without a trace. Then investigators learned that a camera near the beach may have captured something important. The surrounding area contained several farms, and because vandalism had become a recurring problem, some landowners had installed cameras to watch over their property. One of those cameras recorded a red and white Ford Bronco parked beside Heather's Nissan on the day she disappeared. Now, the vehicle alone didn't prove anything, but it was the first solid object detectives could trace, and within days, they found the man who was driving it. See, sometime after Heather's disappearance, the police were doing a routine traffic stop, and one of the cars that they checked was a red and white Ford Bronco, and the driver was a man by the name of Marvin Ray Dill, who went by his nickname of Marty. As soon as the police saw this guy, they were stunned, because Marty bore a striking resemblance to the composite sketch in Heather's case. He matched the height and build descriptions, and when the cops searched his car, they recovered several items. Inside the car, they found several restraints, firearms, rubber gloves, and weapons of various sorts. This immediately put the cops on high alert. The disappearance was still fresh at the time, and now they'd found the guy whose car was found parked close to Heather's on the day of her disappearance. And everything else matched pretty consistently, from the make of the car to the actual man himself. But here's the problem. They couldn't arrest Marty right away. Just because he looked suspicious didn't mean that he was automatically guilty without any evidence. This was exactly what the police needed to find first. So within a week of Heather's disappearance on August 31st of 1995, search warrants for Marty's house and car were granted, and the investigators got to work. They swabbed and swept every inch of the car, and they did find a couple of alarming things. They found strands of hair that matched the color hair of the missing woman, but DNA tests had to be conducted to know for sure. They also obtained some fingerprints from the interior of the car, as well as some areas that contained DNA, but it's unclear if they tested these samples to find out if they really belonged to Heather or not, because this was the 90s, and DNA testing, well, it wasn't what it is today. But authorities believed it warranted further investigation regardless. So very quickly, on September 1st, Marty's home was swarmed by the police and the FBI. But this visit would not go according to plan, because as soon as Marty got wind of being surrounded by the police and the FBI, he barricaded himself in his home, and he was armed. This was a very tense situation. You have potentially an unpredictable person who's barricaded in a small space and could make an unpredictable decision at any minute. And on the other side, you have the police and the FBI trying to calm him down and just get him to surrender. They tried to assure him he was not getting arrested, and they were only there to execute a search warrant. But things escalated pretty quickly. The problem was, Marty was threatening himself, claiming that if the police didn't leave, he was going to do exactly what they had feared. And if Marty took himself out of the picture, well, any hope of finding Heather alive would be gone. The police did everything they could to get Marty to surrender, but he refused. Just moments later, a loud pop echoed through the neighborhood. Marty had taken his own life and taken with him the truth of what had happened to Heather on that sunny afternoon, at least in theory. Because even though the police felt confident that Marty was involved in this, and this recent turn of events certainly seemed like the actions of someone with a guilty conscience, they still couldn't prove much. They had means, they had opportunity, and he matched the guy in the sketch. But that still didn't mean he was guilty. This was a devastating end to this lead, because investigators really thought that they were onto something with this progress. But sadly, though, one action changed everything. Even though Marty was now out of the picture, the trailer was still deeply searched following this really unnerving incident, and nothing in connection to Heather was even found. But they did recover a note inside the trailer that was written by Marty, but again, there was not even a single mention of Heather or anything remotely close to her incident. But people did look into some strange things that Marty was doing and saying in the days leading up to this event. First of all, and this information came from Marty's dad and uncle, the latter being a former police officer himself, Marty was acting really erratically when he found out that he matched the description of the composite sketch. He'd threatened to harm himself multiple times following this situation. Someone had also called him and claimed that Marty matched the sketch perfectly, and after that, he noticed a very significant change in his behavior. He claimed that Marty vowed to do something reckless if the police ever showed up to his house. And Marty made good on that promise. But soon enough, an anonymous caller came forward to the police. He was told by a woman who lived in a home close to Marty that he told her something along the lines of, "The less you know, the better it is." Apparently, he didn't want her involved in something, but the context of this conversation, it's largely unclear, which is why we don't know for sure if it's even about Heather or not. But I'm unsure why this woman would have called in about this if she didn't truly believe that this was somehow in reference to Heather's investigation. But this woman also confirmed Marty's uncle's statement, and she admitted that Marty told her as well if the police ever showed up to his home, he was going to do something irreversible. But here's where things get even more strange. See, Marty was a married man, and according to his own wife, she also grew incredibly suspicious of him in relation to Heather's disappearance. That's because after she found out that he perfectly matched the sketch of the perpetrator, she confronted him about it. She flat out asked him if he was at the beach the day that Heather disappeared. Marty then flew into a fit of rage and ordered his wife, Tracy, to just leave the home. Now, all of this might be coincidental, because who wants to be pinned for a crime just because they're suspicious? But it didn't seem that way to the police. Why was he so adamant about doing something reckless if the police showed up at his house? If he had nothing to hide and knew that he had no hand in Heather's disappearance, why would he act this way? Why did he want even fewer people involved? And what did he not want these people to know? All of this information is really confusing, But really, it just runs in circles. The investigators, or anyone for that matter, feared they wouldn't get any answers because the death of the one who knew everything basically locked this case down for good. At least, that's how it seemed. But detectives pressed on regardless. Investigators then believed their next best option was to press Tracy, Marty's wife, for any information he may have let slip. They brought her in for questioning, and they spoke with her extensively, and they even tried to get her to testify against Marty in a trial, but she refused. In fact, not only that, she refused to answer any of their questions at all, and invoked her Fifth Amendment right to silence. She refused to say a word. There's just a lot of uncertainty here. But one thing is for sure, Heather's case was right back to square one, with no leads, with no progress, and no answers, and no sign of the missing woman herself. So after the whole Marty Dill scenario, the police were still looking into suspects, but most of them still believed that he was the one who was involved in Heather's disappearance. But there was another problem that led to a huge number of issues between the Teague family and the police. Heather's mom, Sarah, didn't believe that Marty should have been the primary suspect in her daughter's disappearance. If you remember, Marty matched the description and the general composite sketch made public by the police. But there's a problem with that. At the time of her disappearance, Marty was supposedly clean-shaven and bald. He'd been compared to the sketch with older pictures of him. Tim had clearly seen a guy wearing either shaggy hair or a shaggy wig and a beard. And most recent pictures of Marty, in which he was clean-shaven and bald, didn't match that sketch. This was a huge error on the police's part. Sarah believes the police were going after him with tunnel vision and not basing their actions on the general facts of the case. Now, you might agree with this, but I'm sure there's still a question in the back of your mind. Well, if Marty is innocent, then why was he so scared of the police coming after him? And why was his wife so adamant she wasn't going to say anything at all? Well, this behavior was also explained when you look at his previous charges. See, Marty was no model citizen. He'd actually been arrested for growing controlled substances, and he was being looked at for a 5-year prison sentence. But he took a plea deal, which then led him to only spend 40 days in prison before he was released on probation. He had a couple other charges against him, like disorderly conduct as well as substance-related felonies, but he was not deemed a threat to society or himself. Even though this is just a theory, mere speculation, it is believed that Marty didn't want to go back to prison for breaking parole or for growing illegal substances, and he was nervous because he didn't want to be on the police's radar. But still, with all of this stacked against him, there just wasn't any real evidence tying him to Heather's case. With this, the leads on the case had completely run out. Police were trapped at another dead end, and with this, 10 years would pass without an answer. But then, the FBI got involved. Ten years later, in 2005, the FBI released a report on Heather's case, detailing DNA samples being sent for testing. But what really stood out to everyone was that the Bureau claimed to have another person of interest in this case. His name was Christopher J. Bello. He lived in Henderson County. Eerily enough, he'd pleaded guilty to the charges of involuntary manslaughter of a woman named Catherine Fetzer in 1991. She was actually someone he was having an affair with. Christopher would ultimately be sentenced to 11 to 18 years in prison for this crime. He was also suspected to be involved in other missing female cases, like those of Mary Kushto, who went missing in May of 1995, Christina Porco, who was last seen leaving her parents' apartment on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina in '86, and Shailene Farrell, who went missing after a work shift in August of '94 in Ohio. Christopher also matched the composite sketch, if you count the shaggy hair and beard, and after combing through all the available evidence and clues like the farm video footage from '95, investigators allege that he and Marty, they may have worked together. See, when the car footage was enhanced by the FBI and reviewed over and over, they concluded that a bald man may have been seen sitting in the driver's seat of the Bronco, and investigators believe this may have been Marty, and the other man with the longer, messy hair was the one that took Heather and put her in the back of that car. Again, even the enhanced footage, though, is extremely grainy, and you have to have a really sharp eye to make out any of these details, but regardless, that thought was noteworthy. It was also revealed that Christopher was in the general area where Heather was last seen at the time of the incident, and she also matched the description of all the other women that he'd been connected to over the years. Interestingly enough, Christopher also left the area shortly after her disappearance. And can you guess what the exact day was when he left? The day Marty took his own life. It's very suspicious and leads you to wonder whether it was a coincidence or whether there was more to it. To add to that, Sarah was also notified that Marty and Christopher were classmates back when they were younger. As of present, though, he was released from prison, and he wasn't charged in any other woman's case, or in Heather's for that matter, even though he was picked out of a police lineup 3 times by none other than Telescope guy, Tim Waltall, the only witness to this entire case. As for Christopher, he's maintained his innocence throughout this, and he's denied having anything to do with Heather's disappearance. And to this day, Heather has still not been found. Her mom, Sarah, had her legally declared deceased in 2007, and since then, her mom has repeatedly pled with police for more transparency in her daughter's investigation, but she claims that police officers are not willing to work with her, and they aren't even keeping her up to date with the case details, because police actually exhumed the body of Marty Dill so that they could extract a cleaner DNA sample on him. And this was done so they could compare his DNA with samples that were taken from the bottom half of Heather's swimsuit. This whole situation makes no sense, and Heather's mother feels that the Kentucky State Police have developed tunnel vision, and they're dead set on pinning Marty for this crime, neglecting to follow any other leads or suspects. Still, she has fought tirelessly and alone in this journey for getting answers for her daughter's disappearance and what even happened to her. Her work has led to some progress, but it's still not anywhere near the finish line, and she's currently tied up in a lawsuit against the investigators to try to get to the bottom of what's even going on here. At the end of the day, Heather's life was stolen from her far too soon. And for what reason? She was a lone woman just sunbathing on a beach, enjoying an afternoon while waiting for her boyfriend to pick her up for breakfast. She wasn't in a sketchy place. She wasn't out asking for trouble. She was just a woman enjoying some time alone when a bushy-haired man emerged from the woods and took advantage of that.